In this video, we're going to look at some form controls and attributes that we can use for data validation that are built into HTML. So some controls that we can use besides the regular text input that we see a lot are email controls, URL controls, telephone controls, number controls, range controls, dates, and times. All specialized HTML5 controls that can be used for data input. And each one of those has a limited amount of data validation that it can do. And we're going to talk about some of the ways we do that in these videos. They also have some attributes for working with them. We have an autofocus attribute. Anything we put the autofocus on will automatically receive focus when the page is loaded. And we also have a placeholder attribute that lets us stick some temporary data into one of these form elements that will hold the spot, show the user what good data looks like, and it will disappear once the user starts typing data into that box. So let's take a look at a form that uses some of these controls and attributes. This is the email form that we saw previously. It looks a lot like this. Email address, name, they've added a phone number and a join button down here. So we have our form, it's an email form, action is join PHP and method is get. We have a label for our email address as we did before, but this time the input type has been changed to email. So an email input will automatically get validated by the browser and basically is looking to see that there's an @ sign and that there's a dot and there's probably a domain name after the dot. I don't know if it actually validates the domain names to see if they're valid or not, because HTML validation is more limited than what we can do with JavaScript, and we'll talk more about that later. So this email input type will automatically detect if, for instance, this address up here does not have an @ sign, and this browser is actually generating the error message here that says, please include an @ in the email address. And the thing that they typed is missing an @ sign. So it's doing some limited validation of an email address to make sure it looks like an email address. And that's not our JavaScript, that's built into the browser because it's an email control. Okay. Another thing that's a bit different about this is we've added a label for phone that is of type telephone number, type equals tel, and we added a placeholder that shows the user the format they should be typing their phone number. And in this case, it is area code, exchange, and then the number, which is pretty common for a US telephone number. All right, so we end up with this form. You can see the placeholder here. It says 999-999. That's the placeholder for phone number so the users can see what it looks like. And as we talked about, our email address validation there. Some HTML5 attributes we can use, some more attributes we can use that are whose purpose is for data validation. We have a required attribute, which will make that control required. We have a title attribute, a pattern attribute. We'll talk about that in just a second. We have a no validate attribute and an autocomplete attribute. No validate is pretty clear. It's basically saying, hey, don't validate this field. It's telling the web browser not to validate it. That doesn't mean we can't access it with JavaScript if we want. And we have an autocomplete, which we can turn on or off. And I think we'll see examples of that coming off, but I will just make a small comment about that. There's nothing more frustrating to me than having things saved in my browser to make my life easier, and then having some developer turn off the autocomplete on the form so that my browser can't fill out those fields for me. I hate that, but that's just my personal opinion. Now, there are security reasons why you may not want to do that. Maybe you don't want people's credit cards filling in automatically for security reasons. It may be an application that's being used on a kiosk where everybody could read it, but that doesn't make sense because they'd have to be logged into their browser. I don't know. There may be valid reasons for it, but I personally don't like it when developers turn off autocomplete. We also have some pseudo classes to tell whether certain elements are required, whether they're valid or invalid. And we'll talk about those as they come up. So let's look at our HTML form for email list joining that we've been studying and look at some of these things. We have now required that the email address be entered by just sticking the keyword required right in there into the definition for the input, for the email input. It is now required. So not only is it going to check for the @ sign and the dot, it'll also check to make sure they type something at all. And then they have also turned off autocomplete for this field. So if you had your browser email address saved in your browser so that it could help you fill out forms, it's not going to help you fill out this form. We also required the name by sticking a required field in there. And then the telephone number is also set to required. But now we've also added a pattern. And the pattern attribute lets us set a regular expression. And if you haven't learned regular expressions yet, you should take the time to try and learn them. It takes a while. They're easy to learn for simple things. If you master them, they are the most incredibly powerful things you can use in programming. And every language now, including HTML, which didn't used to have it, has support for regular expressions. So we can specify a pattern for our phone number to validate our phone number. So just looking quickly at this expression, this is saying that we need 3 digits. So there's the number 3, this /G says we need 3 digits, followed by a dash, followed by 3 more digits, followed by a dash, followed by 4 more digits. That's basically how it works. Very, very powerful pattern matching built into regular expressions. And then a title that says must be, and it shows the actual format. If they don't match that pattern, it's probably going to tell them that. So here it is. They just typed in their exchange and their number, so 555-5555. They didn't put in an area code, so they got an error message through the browser validation that says, please match the requested format. And then there's that message, must be in this format, 3 digits, -3 digits, -4 digits. So regular expressions.